Hi, and welcome to Jules Voto's Photo Focus. This video is the fourth installment in my series, Vintage Lens, Modern Camera. And the lens we're going to be looking at today is Nikon's Nikkor 200mm f4. Now this particular one is the AI version, and this is the one that I shot with on my Nikon mirrorless camera, my Nikon Z6, using the F to Z adapter. But I just want to give you a little bit of history of this lens. This lens in various versions has been around since 1961. Now the Nikon F came out, as we all know, in 1959. They introduced the 200 f4 sometime in 1961. Now this is not the original version. It looks very similar to it. This version that I have here is actually from 1968, and you will note it has been AI'd by Nikon. And you could always tell a lens AI'd by Nikon if the aperture ring was replaced. Okay, and this lens is in mint condition, and I think I paid like 20 bucks for this lens several years back. So there's a ton of these lenses available. They were made from 1961 all the way through to, I think, 1996. That was the AIS version. Then there's various versions along the way. The original version focused down to 10 feet, as does this version that I have here from, again, dating from 68. They had 6 aperture blades and 4 elements and 4 groups. It has a retractable lens hood, which is very nice. In 1969, they shortened the minimum focus distance down to 7 feet and added an additional aperture blade, so it went to 7 blades. There was also a multi-coated version of this lens that came out, I believe, in 1973. And then finally, there was a K version. K version lenses have the rubberized focus ring and are multi-coated. You know, this is the AI version, but just it looks very similar to this. And that would be the K version of 75. And they went to 5 elements in 5 groups. And then we have my version here, the AI version, again, dating from around 1977. It has 9 blades, focuses down to 7 feet, and again has 5 elements in 5 groups. So the images you see in this video were taken with this lens on the Z6 using that F to Z adapter. Of course, this also has the retractable hood, takes 52mm filters, as does the older version. And this particular one stops down to f32. Some of them go to 32, some of them go to 22. Nikon, many of their lenses, the 135 3.5, 105 2.5, there were many versions over the years. Some was just a cosmetic change. Others were some optical, adding an additional element, or adding multi-coating, or adding the rubberized focus ring, or close focus distance. So if you're a collector and you want to collect 200 f4s, there's going to be quite a few versions that you would need to collect. But you can see that the weight is similar on these lenses, but you could see that the newer version, the AI version, and the AIS version are shorter and thinner. This one's a little thicker around the middle where the focus ring is. But I'll tell you, I really like the metal focus rings on these older Nikkor lenses. I just think it feels better than the rubberized ring. I recently came back from a trip to New Orleans, and I tried to travel light, but I always end up taking more than what I really need. So I took my Z6, the 24 to 72/8, the 14 to 30, and rather than taking one of my 70 to 200s, I took the 200 f4 because I like to have a telephoto just to get some detail shots. It's so nice traveling with this lens because it's so light. It weighs just under 19 ounces, 530 grams with the built-in hood. It takes 52mm filters, as I mentioned earlier. The lens is very easy to manually focus on the mirrorless camera because you have that focus peaking, as well as you can enlarge the view to give you a 100% view and really focus on the details. Even without that, the longer lenses are just easier to focus, you know, rather than, let's say, a wide angle manual focus lens. It's a little more difficult to focus because it doesn't snap in and out of focus as easily. The lens is sharp, even wide open, and a pleasure to use. I also took this lens on a trip to Las Vegas and Red Rock Canyon back in 2021. And it proved very handy on that trip. There are plenty of these lenses on the used market. Prices vary greatly, but I would say you should be able to pick up a decent one, $50, $60, maybe a little less for one of the older ones, a little more for one of the newer ones. And if you're looking for one, I would suggest that you get one of the lenses that focuses down to 7 feet as opposed to 10 feet. One way to tell is the chrome ring towards the front with the lens information on it, as you see right here. If that is black, it should be a lens that focuses down to 7 feet. So if you're buying it on eBay or somewhere where you're not going to actually see the lens in person, then just look at the pictures and see what the minimum focus distance is, or ask the question of the seller. But I think you'll be happier with the one that will focus down to 7 feet. And if you want multi-coating, either look for one with the designation QC. Q is the number of elements in the lens. C stands for multi-coating. And then they dropped that C when they went to the K version with the rubberized ring. And all the ones with the rubberized ring have multi-coating. Now, one other thing. Some people use a 200 millimeter lens for portraits. And I think it's a little too long. Not really good indoors and in a studio setting unless you have a pretty large room. Outdoors, it can work. One thing to make note of, and I think this is an advantage to a 200, it's pulling the background in, and it's including less of the background than if you used, let's say, a 105 millimeter lens for the same image size. So here's an example which I shot in my living room of this mannequin head. And this first image here was shot at approximately 14 feet away. And of course the focus is on the eye of the mannequin. And you could see that mostly the background is of the front door to my house. I then put on the 105, Nikon's 105, 2.5, and moved the camera closer. Camera was on a tripod. I moved it to about 7 feet away to get approximately the same image size, so that the image of the head was about the same size. And you could see that by doing that, that included a lot more of the background, okay, because the 105 has a wider view than the 200. And also you will notice with the 200, it pulled that background closer because the lens has greater magnification than a 105. So if you're looking to do some outdoor portraits and you don't have much choice as far as background, there's not the greatest background, by using a longer lens, you don't need as much background, if that makes sense. Also, of course, you could just throw it out of focus by shooting wide open. You're going to get less depth of field. That's an advantage of the 200. The disadvantage of the longer lens, of course, is that you're further away from your model. Especially if you're in a noisy situation, outdoors, it makes communication a little bit more difficult. And I like to be closer to my subject. I like a 105 or even an 85 for portraits. But now you know what happens if you do have that 200. Makes it a little easier to isolate the subject on a background. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I come out with a new installment in this series, Vintage Lens, Modern Camera, every third Wednesday of the month at 11 a.m. And of course, every Wednesday of the month, I publish a new video at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for watching. I will talk to you next time.